Welcome back to Nurses Uncorked, guys. We are putting out a bonus episode this week because we want to get this really important information to all the Ascension nurses out there that are affected by the cyber attack. We will still have another episode on Tuesday. This is a bonus episode for you guys.
I'm Nurse Jessica Seitz, along with Nurse Erica. We're Nurses Uncorked, the podcast that takes nursing facts with nursing comedy and makes a little cocktail out of it. Hey everybody, welcome back to Nurses Uncorked. It's Nurse Jessica Seitz here, along with Nurse Erica, and we are doing an impromptu episode this week. We have a guest back with us from a former episode, which was episode 31. We have legal nurse consultant Matthew Garvey here. Woot woot, yeah.
Dr.
That's what I'm talking.
Garvey.
If should I address
no
you?
doctor.
Dr. Matt. Sounds like something
Do
steamy.
not.
So Erica can probably introduce, I think, Matthew better than I can, because you know him a lot better than I do, and he's got a lot of letters after his name and all that hoopla. And then we'll get into our drink of the week and talk all things about Ascension Hospital. It's going to be a good episode. So tell us a little bit about Matthew, Erica. What do you know?
Quite a bit, probably more than he would want me to share on here. But I specifically reached out to Matt for this episode because of his unique experience. So not only is he a legal nurse consultant, but he's actually in law school. He is an RN, but he also is a DNP prepared RN, MBA, a million other letters after his name, alphabet soup, but also has considerable experience in leadership positions and has a really good working knowledge of organizational systems. And I think that he is going to be able to provide a very unique perspective and advice, hopefully, for all of the thousands of Ascension Healthcare nurses around the country that have been affected by this cyber attack.
And currently works at the bedside. Don't leave out my bedside.
I'm sorry. What else did I miss?
Currently works at the bedside. That was it.
Tell them your website for legal nurse consulting.
Well, hang on. Before he does this, I want to have you back on another episode, Matthew, where you don't have to be professional. Can we do that?
Absolutely.
Okay, good. Yes, tell them about your website, please.
So if you would like to see any of the things that I do with legal nurse consulting, if you're an attorney, do attorneys watch Nurses Uncorked? They should.
Yeah.
They could probably
get some
Ryan
good. On, remember?
Yeah, that's right. They could probably get some good ideas about cases from Nurses Uncorked. Anyway,
honestly,
if you would like to see what I do, you can go to Garvey, which is Garv as in Victor, EY, C as in Charlie, E as in Egg, S as in Sam. Listen, I don't even know my own website. .com. That's it. It took me a second. Because I started to do my email and I was like, don't email me. Just go on there. There's a contact me and it goes straight to my email. So garveyces.com.
Awesome.
And if any of you guys heard me talking about the NurseCon cruise recently, and my friend that was an educator on there, this is him. This is Matt. So
more importantly,
this is
the one that was able to get a hold of Moscato. That's what I want to know. That's
the only one.
That's really all people care about.
I told Erica, I said we should have done Moscato. I said we should have done Moscato as the drink of the week because, Moscato Gate. So
that's right.
Yeah, Moscato Gate.
Do you have a cocktail of the week for us, Jessica?
I do, and it was very impromptu because Erica sprung this on me at last minute that I was in charge. So I had to, and you guys know I'm not a big alcohol drinker other than wine. Let me not say alcohol. I like
really?
my wine. Yeah. Whoa. Let's not get crazy here. So I went with something very simple. We're just doing vodka and cranberry because that's what I had. So I'm a Nurses Uncorked glass. You put in as much vodka as you feel like. I've got in here about a shot and a half, and then you add your cranberry juice on top. It's a vodka and cranberry. It's really easy, and you drink it. That's it. Let's move on. Let's get into the good stuff.
Go-to.
Was that the easiest cocktail ever? Cheers, everybody. Cheers.
It's very early for me, so I was not feeling a cocktail.
And it's early for me too, but
it is a little early.
I'm going to try. I'm taking one for the team. I'm going to do it.
All right.
The last time I was on, Jessica, you were waiting for a basketball game or a football game. So see, we scheduled it earlier, so there was no football or basketball on.
There's not. No, nothing like that. So that's good. I mean, no rush.
All right. So I want to preface everything today. Any examples that we may discuss that have been submitted, that nurses have sent to me. Of course, these are alleged. Some of this is going to be our individual opinions. So put that in legal terms better than I can, Matt.
Well, I will preface anything that I say with, I am not a lawyer. This is not legal advice. This is advice coming from me, or even just my opinion coming from my experience in healthcare, with a little bit of legal knowledge that I've been given. So not legal advice. I'm not saying do this or don't do this. Most of what I'm telling you is what I would do if I were in your shoes.
Yes. Good. Okay.
Well said. Well said. So let's give some backstory first,
Yeah.
right, Erica? Like on what?
Yeah.
Let's talk about what happened.
I believe it was May 8th. Might have been May 6th, but we are essentially in the third week of what has been a nationwide massive cyber attack, ransomware that has affected Ascension Healthcare. Ascension Healthcare is the largest Catholic health hospital organization in the U.S. I believe they're in 19 states.
Praise
It
Jesus.
is. Oh, what? What did you say?
Well, I grew up Catholic, so the second you say it's the largest Catholic, and I worked in a Catholic hospital my whole life, so I feel like I need to do the sign of the cross.
Oh,
You have to
carry
give
on.
glory.
Yeah.
So these poor nurses, that was their Nurses Week gift. Here's a massive cyber attack. And by all accounts, this has effectively, allegedly, kind of decimated all of their systems online. So everything from their electronic medical record, which I believe they primarily use Epic, to all of their other systems. I will say that their Kronos, their payroll system, has not been affected to my knowledge, but all of the other internal systems that are perhaps internet based, all of their communications, their order entry, everything like that has been affected. But I also want to point out that each individual facility has been affected a little bit differently and has been handling it a little bit differently. So some of this might be specific to a few locations, but not across the board. So I have been inundated since this happened just every day with tons and tons of messages, emails from nurses with horror stories that we'll talk about, and really just kind of desperate for help and terrified for their patient's safety and for their own safety as a nurse, protecting their license. So I thought, Matt,
Is this true? There's 3,000 hospitals involved in this? I just Googled this.
You know what? I'm not sure. That it could very well be.
It says
Ascension is a huge system.
It says it's
They're a
involved
massive
in
system.
16 states, 396 cities, which encompasses over 3,000 locations. Now, maybe they're not all specifically hospital, but
right.
I mean, there could be like outpatient places, but that's a lot. That is,
it's massive.
Yeah. I was going to say basically
19,
was,
but it's huge.
I was just thinking, like, even if you don't work at one of these hospitals, you probably know somebody who does, or a family member that's been in there. Like, that's a lot of people and a lot of locations. Like, this is ginormous. It's big.
Well, and even if you don't work there, cyber attacks, unfortunately, are becoming much more common. So you have a considerable risk of being in a similar position one day if you work in healthcare. So this is going to be valuable information for pretty much everybody out there.
Absolutely.
But I thought we would start with why weren't they prepared for this Ascension? It's not their first cyber attack. And, I was talking to another friend of mine, a nurse in Florida, also named Matthew. And he had a really valid point. He's like, because they have the hurricanes there, right? Jessica lives there,
Yeah.
and he
Yeah.
said every year we prepare for this. We prepare for downtime procedures starting like Memorial Day, right about this time of year. And everyone is re-in-serviced. We know exactly what to do because inevitably the tornadoes hit and we lose everything. So they kind of seamlessly there immediately just switch into downtime procedures. So it can be done proactively is the point. So why is Ascension allegedly so unprepared for this? Thoughts?
Yeah, I would say that it's not just Ascension. I mean, obviously this is Ascension and it's affecting Ascension because that's who the ransomware attacked. But I was talking to the CEO of the hospital I currently work for, phenomenal man, love him, great leader. And we were talking about this yesterday, and I said we're also not prepared. And he was like, well, "We have downtime proceedings and policies." And I said, "When was the last time do you think we used it?" And he said, "Well, anytime we do hospital upgrades, of course, we go to downtime proceedings." And I said, "Sir, I keep notes on a sheet of paper in the emergency department. And when the computer system comes back up, I back time it."
Right.
And he just looked at me and he said, "Well, that's not our policy." And I said, "But that's what's happening. And as our CEO, you should know that." So
Right.
I don't think anyone's prepared. And in talking to some of my friends who work in leadership, I think there are a couple reasons why. One, I think it's this head in the sand mentality of, well, it's not happened to us yet. And
Mm-hmm.
why would we invest the money and the capital in preparing for something that's not yet affected us? Which, you know how I feel about that, Erica. I'm huge on being proactive and
Mm-hmm.
preventing things like this from happening. I want to be ready. I don't want to have to kind of plan in the moment. I want to have a plan in place and then just be able to um, tweak that as we go along. But I think
Yeah.
that is huge. I think, like as you said, this isn't the first time Ascension's had a cyber attack. It's definitely not the first time there's been a ransomware attack. I mean, I think Common Spirit Health just had one
Yes.
less than a year ago. So why every hospital in the nation didn't realize that this is a risk that they needed to
Mm-hmm.
mitigate and take proactive approach to that, I have no clue. Essentially, you get what you plan for.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And
Good
it doesn't
point.
seem like Ascension planned for this. And so
Yeah.
they're
I was going to
currently
say,
drowning.
yeah, I think that as fast as things are changing and what they require nurses to chart, it's like they think that they're on the ball and they've got downtime forms and whatnot. But by the time a month goes down the road or 2 months, there's been A, B, C, and D added that they haven't taken into account. And they're like, oh, what about
Mm-hmm.
this scale? What about this part of admission stuff? So it's like they can't even, they're throwing so many more things on healthcare workers that it's almost like partly almost impossible to keep up with the amount of things that they want us to document, you know? So I
Yeah.
think that in itself is a part of it, but I'm sure that they have their monetary focus in other locations, unfortunately.
Well, the
And then the other thing
general.
that I would say there, oh, I'm sorry, Erica.
No,
The other
go
thing
ahead.
I would say there too is 100% of technology will fail. Like
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
technology has a life cycle.
Right.
It doesn't live forever. As smart as we get with putting firewalls in place, the smarter hackers and ransomware are going to get in breaking firewalls.
Mm-hmm.
It's going to be a vicious cycle. And I think that's what hospital leaders, it's one of the things that I said when I was a leader. This is going to fail.
Yeah.
It's when, right? It's when is this going to affect your hospital system? When is this going to affect even your just singular department, that your computer system should go out or your internet goes out or what have you? Technologies, it has a life cycle. And I think that we fail to realize that sometimes we put too much, we depend on it, which it's great. It's phenomenal. It has changed the facade of healthcare and the way that we provide healthcare, and made it in many ways more efficient, as we can see when we no longer have it. But I think we have to realize that it has a life cycle and it fails.
Yeah.
It's
Yeah.
not if, it's when.
Mm-hmm.
Right. The general consensus from the thousands of nurses that have reached out to me has been they were not prepared for this. And Ascension immediately has put out public responses in the media saying, basically everything's fine. It's fine. We prepared for this. Our employees are trained in this. We have downtime procedures. But all of the nurses I'm hearing from are like, Where, when, how? We were handed a packet of paper forms, and that's it. There has been no preparation for this. And a lot of them are seeing these forms for the first time. And a lot of these facilities are already running out of the forms. So how prepared were they? And I think that's
Right.
the issue. We're not necessarily blaming Ascension for being a victim of a cyber attack. It's really about their response. Why were they not prepared? And now that you know it has happened, why are you not allegedly stepping up to the plate and doing everything that you should be doing to support your frontline staff? That's really the issue here, in my opinion.
Is there insurance involved? Like, do they have insurance against like something like this happening? I wonder.
I don't
I don't
know.
know what made me think of that,
I'm
but I'm obviously
I'm
not if
not
they've waited
sure.
so long. They haven't paid out yet. So
Yeah.
Well,
maybe not. I don't
and
know.
sometimes I know that there are governmental affairs that play into that as well.
Mm-hmm.
Depending on where the ransomware came from, essentially
Mm.
they'll say you can't pay it because we don't
Oh,
negotiate with
true.
terrorists. Like
Oh, interesting. Yeah.
there are definitely players behind the scenes that are telling them whether they can or cannot pay it, and I
There's
Ascension
gotta
can't
be,
make
yeah.
that decision alone. I know that they can't make that decision alone. So I agree, Eric. I think it's important to recognize that we're not blaming them for being a victim, but
Right.
just simply talking about their response and how it could have been better.
Oh, well, and let's
Yes,
make this
to say the least.
hopefully a learning thing for the next time it
The
happens,
future.
because it probably will, like Erica said,
Yeah.
Yeah.
So hopefully we
Yeah.
can look at this and see what not to do.
Yeah.
What about Epic, the electronic medical record? What about their responsibility in this, if anything? Because I do believe that Epic is the primary program that they use at Ascension. Why does Epic seemingly not have protocols in place to prevent this, cybersecurity things in place? Because it seems like, and I could be wrong, but that's like their backdoor entry, the ransom cyber attack people, the Russians, whomever it is, we don't know.
Right.
Like what component? I have not heard anybody talk about that. So Epic is the largest electronic medical record nationwide, and facilities will spend millions of dollars to implement Epic. What is their responsibility in this? I don't know.
I mean, I definitely think they have firewalls in place. One of the things I think is interesting about Epic, and if Epic is listening to this, I will preface this with I do not know this to be 100% fact. But when I worked for an organization that was looking to transition to Epic, I did not realize how fragmented it was. At that time, I was told by the leadership that Epic was only an EMR. It was only an electronic medical record. So you had to buy additional add-ons for various things, which I think every time you fragment something and allow another system to interface with it, there's a point of vulnerability. So, for example, Epic is just the EMR. For lab, most labs use Cerner, which talks to Epic.
Mm-hmm.
And then you had to buy a separate add-on for billing because Epic itself did not perform billing procedures. And you had to buy a separate add-on for pharmacy. So I think the more you fragment anything, the more opportunities for vulnerability that you have. But I do think it's interesting that most of the facilities, or some of them at least, we know Ascension now uses Epic, has had these ransomware attacks, and we've really not heard from Epic. I do think that is an interesting point that they're silent on the matter. And it may be, devil's advocate here. That's why Erica and I talk a lot. I play devil's advocate on a lot of things. It may be that they don't know where the breach occurred yet and where that vulnerability was. And so Epic doesn't want to take responsibility for it being them when it wasn't. It was some other system that was used.
Possibly.
But I definitely think that they could say something, or at least just give reassurance to nurses of what they're doing to prevent this from happening in the future and how they're learning from past ransomware cyber attacks.
Yeah.
Right. Maybe updating their firewall stuff or expanding upon it and making it better. Something.
Yeah.
Let's
Yeah, it's very interesting that they're silent.
It is, yeah. Let's jump into what I think is the biggest concern for nurses and healthcare workers right now, and that is the potential liability that they may have. So I want to have you talk about the potential for criminal liability, Board of Nursing liability, and civil liability. A lot of them are being told, basically, when they express their concerns, their safety concerns, they're being told, don't worry, aren't going to be a victim of any repercussions from this because this is a crisis situation and you're prepared. Thoughts, Matt?
Yeah, I think I hesitate calling it gaslighting, but that's gaslighting.
Yeah.
That's a false empowerment. So there is still liability that
Thank you. Say it again. Say it again. They need to know
there is liability. Absolutely, there's liability that lies within that. Essentially, think of it this way: the patient, who would be the individual being harmed, did not cause the crisis, and therefore the patient is still entitled and has a right to receive quality health care regardless of whatever crisis you may be in.
Mm-hmm.
And so there is still liability there. I want to start with civil. That's where most nurses would find themselves potentially. That's the most common. And so civil liability is just money. Essentially, you have someone who's been injured, and as my professor said in law school, their side has been carved out, and you give them money to put that side back and make them whole again. And that's where we see most litigation with nursing happening. There is the philosophy of respondent superior or vicarious liability. So nurses do have protection in that. It doesn't mean that they are completely absolved of their liability. What vicarious liability says is if you're an agent working as an employee, not as a subcontractor. Okay, so if you're a subcontractor, if you're a private nurse working under a 1099, this doesn't necessarily apply to you. You can sometimes get in there, but it's hard. But if you're an employer working for an agency, you're working within the scope of your employment. The agency is receiving a benefit. So they are, right? When I'm a nurse and I'm working for Ascension Health and I'm providing care, the agency's benefit is financial, right? So the organization is actually responsible for the monetary reward and not the nurse. So an easier way of saying that is if you're working for a hospital and you're within the scope of your employment and what you did is not intentional, then the hospital or the organization that you work for will cover whatever the reward is to the injured party. That's a longstanding doctrine. It's only been strengthened throughout the years. So I don't want you to be scared of a civil lawsuit. Obviously, you should have some inherent fear of any type of litigation. But I'm named in a lawsuit now. If you were on the cruise ship, you know that. And one of the first things the lawyer said to me when I walked in was, "Your house is not at risk. Your livelihood is not at risk. Your license is not at risk. No one's taking your car. You're okay." And I was like, "I know that."
That's very reassuring that they did that. That's amazing.
That's a good way to start it out, at least.
Right.
Absolutely. Absolutely. But then know that that's in a silo, right? I mean,
yes.
A civil lawsuit is not going to take your license away, but a board action will.
Mm-hmm.
So moving from civil, which is where we give someone money to make them whole, to board action.
Can I stop you real quick? What if they have their own personal liability insurance? Because that is where civil comes in.
Yeah. So when it comes to liability insurance or medical malpractice insurance, professional liability insurance, whatever you want to call it, that is correct. That applies to a civil lawsuit. So not a criminal lawsuit. We'll talk about it again in the context of board action in just a moment. But it does apply to a civil lawsuit. If I were practicing at Ascension Health right now and I had fear that there were going to be lawsuits that were occurring out of what was happening that I could potentially be named in, I would let my insurance carrier know. So I would give them a call and just say, "Hey, I just want you to know that I am part of the ransom. I'm working at whatever hospital, Ascension Health, and I am part of the ransomware attack. There are things that are happening on the ground level. I just want you to know that I am part of that," to give them a heads up. Most likely they're just going to note it and say, "Okay, thank you." But it's like using your credit card outside of the country, right? If you don't notify your bank, then when you use it outside the country, your bank's like, "Wait a minute, what's happening?" So I think it's always good to notify them and let them know, hey, I'm in it. I'm in the trenches. Just letting you know this is something.
Or they say, by the way, your rates are going up dramatically.
Right. Right.
Thank you for notifying us. Hopefully not. Hopefully not.
Hopefully not. Because you pay your premiums for a year for medical liability or for professional
good.
liability
Then
insurance.
Hopefully they won't up it till next year.
Yeah, you pay them up front. So yeah, did that answer your question, Erica?
Yeah.
Perfect.
I know we're gonna jump into Board of Nursing liability, but what I just want to circle back to the staff being told that they're protected because this is a crisis situation. I think a lot of people are assuming it's something like the umbrella that we were under with COVID, and it's not. That was an official federal emergency designation. This is not that. So that is not true when they are being told that, correct?
No, I would say it's not true. I would say that it would be considered, right? If you were sued, we would definitely talk about that during the litigation. Like where I did my deposition, I would say I was in a ransomware attack. I was, the process is X, Y, and Z. But no, as far as some type of blanket liability because Ascension says they're in a crisis, it means all their nurses are protected. That's not true.
Okay.
Patients still have the right to do what they have a right to exercise their rights, and that is a right to litigation if they feel that they've been injured or harmed at the negligence of a healthcare system, professional, whatever that may be.
Okay. What about Board of Nursing administrative law?
Yeah. So it also does not recuse you of your duties to the Board of Nursing, right? So the Board of Nursing is there to protect the public. They have particular interest in things of this nature because we know that there are now unsafe patient conditions in these facilities.
Mm-hmm.
It's inevitable, right? It's inevitable when you have some type of acute, drastic change that it's not a patient safety issue. So nurses are still accountable to the Board of Nursing, to their standard of practice. Just because you're under what Ascension calls a crisis does not mean that the rest of the world recognizes it as a crisis and gives you a blanket coverage. I do think, again, it would come into play that you were practicing in this subpar environment, but you could still be, held accountable by the board, especially if you do something that's intentional or, which I don't think any of us would, but if you do something that's intentional or just reckless in nature, essentially, you do something that even regardless of the scenario that happened, a reasonable nurse would not have done this. You're still liable for that and accountable to the Board of Nursing. I will say here that if you get professional malpractice insurance or if you get liability insurance, what you need to do is make sure that it has board protection on it.
Yes.
So there is civil protection. Like, for example, my policy is $1 million per event, $6 million aggregate per year. Luckily, I've never used that, knock on wood. But then I also had board coverage. So I have, I think it's $25,000 that they give me to pay for a defense attorney to represent me at the board level. I've never been before the Board of Nursing. I have friends who have been before the Board of Nursing. And if you're going there on a disciplinary action, you need a lawyer.
Yep. Always.
Simple.
Regardless.
Simple. They will tell you do not, that you can represent yourself. It's administrative law. You need a lawyer. If you're going before a board, it is a hearing. There is a judge. You need a lawyer. You need to know your rights, and you need someone who's going to advocate for your rights. So make sure if you buy professional malpractice insurance or liability insurance that you also get board protection on it. But no, they're also still responsible to the Board of Nursing. Practicing in a crisis does not negate your Nurse Practice Act.
Yeah, and I think one of their biggest concerns is the potential for medication errors because their Pyxis, which is their automated medication dispensing cabinet, is that's down as well. So it's not communicating. There are no patients entered into it. Every time they go to pull a med, they have to essentially temporarily add a new patient, the medication every single time, which is very laborious in and of itself. But it's not going to cross-check against an order or anything. And in some cases, I'm told that allegedly the Pyxis is just left wide open. Like the drawers, the cabinets is just left. You can just go and grab anything. it's a total system failure by many accounts. And so the liability with a medication error in this situation is of course higher, but what you're saying is that really is has nothing to do with your responsibility as far as the board of nursing. You are still obligated as a nurse to ensure that you are giving a correct medication, right?
Well,
Yeah,
I would say so. I mean,
absolutely.
the PIC system
Yeah,
wasn't always there, and we, you know what I mean?
right.
Like it goes back to the days that's not how things operated. You pulled it out of the cabinet, and you wrote it down and you triple checked before you gave it. So I would say no, that they're not going to take any of that into account. I wouldn't think so.
No, they may just take it into account and take it into account as far as to say that you were practicing in that environment.
Right.
Um, but I think that if you are practicing in that environment, you need to know how to speak to what safety checks you're putting in place for yourself, which Erica, you
Yeah.
and I talked about. I'm using and Erica and I've heard this because we were both at Redonda's trial so many times, so we're blue in the face. We both want to bang our head against the table. But
Yeah.
the 5 rights of medication,
Yep.
Mhm.
That's what
that
I
is
was about to say.
that's a great framework. I'm not going to say it's a policy, and I'm not going to say that it's every nurse has to use it, because we know that there are people out there who say that it is not a policy. It's a guidance, but it is a great guidance. So 5 rights of medications, double checking patient identifiers. Those are things that you're going to want to do. You can't scan medications anymore. So
But
what
what about
is your
they don't
name?
have
What is your
ID
birthday?
bands? They can't verify that. And maybe a patient is a poor historian and cannot verbalize their own
So
identity.
what are
So
they doing?
what are
Putting
they to do?
paper, like paper bands on them or something? Is that, I'm assuming, what they're doing? They've got to do something.
Yeah, they're
There has to
handwriting
be some way.
bands in some
Yeah.
cases, or they don't have a band at all.
Okay,
Then you have to
they've got to. That's not safe in any way, shape, or form. I would
right.
hope that
They have
that's
to
not
have
true.
a way to identify them.
Yeah,
Yeah, they have to have a
they've-
way to identify them.
They got to have something on them. I mean, that's just scary. I refuse to work under that. I mean, come on, that's just setting yourself up for a nightmare.
Yeah. And that's on Ascension. If they're not putting armbands on patients, that's on the hospital system. That's not on a nurse.
It's horrible.
But even just if a patient's a poor historian, you do what you can, and I think that you document that. I mean, I definitely think that you write that down. Assess patient via 2 identifiers, 5 rights of medications, assessed those, just to know that you did those. If a patient can't identify themselves and they don't have an armband on, gosh, this scares the holy crap out of me.
I know.
But if they don't have identification on, you ask a family member in the room, can you tell me their name? Can you tell me their birth date? Some
If
type of
there is
identifying
one.
information
Better
so
than
that you can
nothing.
identify them. Yeah. And I know, like, technically on air downtime proceedings, which, I'm not working at Ascension. I'm not in this. I have no clue what these nurses are facing on the front lines. But paper MARs, and we always just keep a patient, or not a paper MAR, I'm sorry, but we keep a paper face sheet at the bedside. In the old days, those hung on a clipboard at the end of the bed, if you remember that. And the doctor would walk in and pick the clipboard up off the end of the bed.
But they can't print a face sheet. They can't even input any of the information that would be on a face sheet.
We had a handwritten one, and we copied it. So it has like patient's name, birthday,
There's
insurance.
no room for error here. This is a great, a great
Ridiculous.
What about, Matt, something as simple as, like, should a nurse every time they're on their shift document, the hospital is under, like, a blanket statement every time a, cyber attack, blah, blah, blah. Like, I mean, I know you would as a nurse assume that it was during that time frame and people know, but I mean, I would, they always say if you didn't chart it, it didn't happen. I don't know. Do you think that's necessary?
I would do it.
I
would put that in. Erica and I talked about this a little bit, and I'll speak to a little bit of the deposition side of things, because I've been in several depositions. Again, not a lawyer. This isn't legal advice. This is a nurse's advice as a nurse who's been through a deposition. Is to make it, say what you want to say, but as vaguely as possible. So, for example, I would say, all care provided during this shift was during the ransomware attack of 2024, or, the Ascension ransomware attack of 2024. What that does is it's a statement, but it doesn't tie you into anything. Essentially, if you don't say it in a chart, you can still argue that you thought it, right? So for example, I know Erica posted one. Erica, we'll get personal.
Yes.
Erica posted on Facebook, and it said all safety features were what have you. And I said, I would axe that. You can say that in person, but then that's going to tie you to it. And that's going to give a lawyer some leverage to say, well, all safety checks, aren't you a safety check? Didn't you
Good
perform
point.
2 patient identifiers? Didn't you perform the 5 rights of medication? So how was all safety checks there? So I think you need to be direct and succinct enough to get your point across without imputing things that lawyers could take out of context. So I think that using a single statement at the end of your shift on every chart that just says all care performed this shift by this RN was during the Ascension Health ransomware attack of 2024.
Okay.
And then
Good
that
advice.
way, whenever a lawyer sees it, even if they hadn't thought of that, right? Which you should have, if you know the time, and the hospital should also, because again, it's going to, in theory, decrease their risk. They're going to think it decreases their risk. And so they're going to divulge that. The hospital is going to say, oh, well, you sued us for something that happened during this period of time and we were under a ransomware attack. Again, it just still covers you as a nurse to say, not covers you, but provides some context around the environment that you were practicing in on that shift.
Yeah. Great advice. We have to just touch on briefly the possibility of criminal prosecution because we are, of course, living in a post-Redondevat world. So in this scenario, can you speak to that?
Yeah. So first of all, I want to say that the criminal prosecution of unintentional, unimpaired medical error should be essentially outlawed in all states. Luckily, I live in Kentucky. We were the first to do that. I think that you all are going to talk more about that coming up. So thank you, Kentucky. We're normally behind in all health indicators. And so that's a huge win for us that Kentucky. We did that.
We are so proud of Kentucky. We are so impressed with Kentucky. Absolutely phenomenal, and cannot wait for more states to hopefully follow in Kentucky's footsteps.
Yes, I am super excited. I told someone whenever it happened, I said, this may be one of the first times I'm ever like, I'm proud to be from Kentucky. Because some of our statistics are not where they need to be. So I was proud of us there. But yeah, there's always a possibility of criminal prosecution in essentially 49 states now, not in Kentucky, if it was unintentional. It's rare that it happens. We're seeing it more. And so if it does happen to you, I hope that we learn from Redondevat. I'm going to knock on wood here. So on criminal prosecution, it is highly unlikely that a nurse will face criminal prosecution for an unintentional error, but it does happen, right? We know that it happens. And if it does happen, your professional liability insurance does not cover you. I would hope that Ascension Health would step up and recognize that the environment they're asking you to practice in and protect you on that. But as we've seen with other nurses who've had criminal prosecutions, sometimes organizations stay silent. And so it's very unfortunate. It's very unlikely. But I mean, that possibility does exist. I will say this though, in practicing nursing, I would say you have a higher possibility of getting arrested and charged with reckless driving for going more than 20 over the speed limit than you do for an unintentional medical error that you commit at a hospital. So while I think that there is some risk there, I don't think it's a risk that you should be overly fearful of. I do think that they're outliers, if that makes sense. Okay.
All right. I think that was probably one of the top 2 concerns, and we'll get into the second one, but is the liability. That's what every nurse is really thinking about, I assume, every minute of every shift right now. What would you say to bedside staff, to charge nurses, supervisors that are allegedly being told by management not to enter any sentinel events or incidents into whatever their incident reporting system is because it will create more work?
I think that's absurd.
What?
Yeah.
I think that you can't know what's going on. Listen, I've been in administration. I have my qualms with administration. I have things I love about administration. When I worked as an administrator, there was one of me. right? I've been a unit manager. I've also been a house supervisor. When I was a house supervisor, there was one of me for an entire hospital. I can't be everywhere at every given moment, and I can't see every single thing that is happening on the ground level. And so the only way that we recognize opportunities for improvement or where we need to grow or patient safety issues or staff safety issues is by relying on those reporting systems. I will never, as a leader, and I question the integrity of leaders who ever tell staff members that you cannot enter things into an incident reporting system. To me, that calls into question what you're hiding.
Exactly.
Yeah.
I mean, the underlying insinuation is we don't want you to paint us in a bad light, create a paper trail for anything that we as an organization could potentially be liable for that happened. It's terrible. You need to still enter any adverse events like that, even near misses. That's why we have these reporting systems. Just like you would. And I'm sure there's going to be a whole lot more of them than normal. And that in and of itself is time consuming, but you are obligated to do that. And if a manager or someone is telling you not to, they are probably doing that for nefarious reasons or selfish reasons.
Yeah, there's no other reason I can think of that I would ever tell a staff member not to enter an incident report unless it was something that I was trying to hide. And you know me, I'm huge on transparency. I'm huge on we can't make it better unless we know what's going on.
Yeah.
I would still continue to enter it, and I would smile as I did so.
And I just want to say, Erica, that is your thesaurus dictionary word of the week, nefarious. She has one every episode.
She does.
One word
She
that
always
she
makes
just
fun of my
she pulls out of her ass, and she's like, let's get Jessica with this one.
I
That
don't
is
even
nefarious.
think about it.
Very nefarious. Yes, it is.
I love it.
And
I
I'm
love
gonna
it.
start. I'm keeping a list. I'm keeping a
Oh
list.
God.
Yeah, I'm gonna make
It's a
her a
good
shirt with all
word.
of
It's a
them.
good word.
It is a
Nefarious.
good word. It sounds fancy.
It is.
It
King
does.
It makes
nefarious.
me think of like Maleficent.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I like that.
My
Yeah.
mind immediately goes to Disney characters
Yeah.
of like,
Yeah, I see that. Yeah.
nefarious in a nefarious land far, far away.
I had to call you out on that. Sorry.
That's all right. I know. You love to do it.
I do.
What about the practical on the floor issues of not being prepared? Something as simple as not having a hard chart, a binder to put the paper documentation in, not having a rack to put the binders in. You know, it's like when we transitioned to electronic medical records, it's like they just threw away all the binders and the racks. And I'm being told by tons of nurses that they literally don't have anything to hold the loose papers together. And I'm just sitting here thinking, okay, why did a manager in that situation not take the company card, whatever, run to Office Depot and buy a bunch of 3-ring binders?
Should be skyrocketing right now.
Yeah.
Staples and Office Depot.
Like, that's a simple fix.
I mean, listen, Walmart sells 3-ring binders.
Right.
Kroger sells 3-ring binders.
And hole
That
punch.
is not hard.
And
hole punch. Meyer sells 3-rings binders. These are all places I've went and bought them just in the last few weeks from law school. So I understand that hospitals got rid of them. I think that if you're a nurse leader and you're watching this, what you need to do is advocate for those things to be placed in your emergency kits, right?
Yeah,
all hospitals have to have them.
Being prepared.
That should be part of emergency preparedness. If you're in an emergency, most likely you're not going to have internet service. So those things need to be part of an emergency preparedness plan. It is insane that they don't have anywhere to put this stuff. And I think Erica, people tell you this stuff. Aren't nurses being asked to keep this in their lockers?
Yes, I have heard that from some nurses, that they've been told to keep their paper documentation in their locker until, they're no longer on downtime. Insane to me.
That's not okay.
Yeah, can you speak to that?
Wow.
Well, first of all, that's putting a legal document in the hands of a nurse. So any chart that any patient's chart is a legal document.
Allegedly,
correct.
Yes.
So there's, that's a legal document. And essentially, if a hospital is saying you keep it in your locker, then the onus is on you to protect that legal document. So first of all, I would say no and laugh and be like, that was a great suggestion.
We will
I
not
don't know.
be doing that.
Could we maybe put a bin? Like I don't
Right.
know. Like
Yeah.
like the old days, you broke the chart down and you put it in the bin.
Wrapped it in a
scan
rubber
bin.
band
Yeah.
and threw it in the bin till medical records came to pick it up. Yeah,
Yeah.
we're really
I
aging
mean,
ourselves.
Yeah.
Come on, people. Let's
Right.
go. We can do this.
It's almost as if we have completely abandoned
They've lost touch.
nursing without a computer. We have no
Yeah.
clue what nurses did. And it's not been that long ago, right? I think all hospitals had to go electronic by 2015, right?
Mhm.
So we were still paper charting in the early 2000s. And even up until the
Yeah.
2000 teens, we were still paper charting.
Oh yeah, my
It's not like this-
hospital, it was even way past that. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, it's not like this is new information. There are still practicing nurses who know how to paper chart. There are still nurse
It's me.
administrators or hospital administrators.
I like
Even me,
it.
and I'm not.
I like it.
I've not done that in a long time, but even me.
Maybe I should apply at one of the
Ascension.
Honestly, you'd be a resource right now, because that's something
Yeah.
I'm hearing from a lot of them is there might only
Yes.
be one or two experienced nurses that have ever had to do this on a given unit. And those poor nurses now are being inundated as the resource and constantly,
Mhm.
being asked to answer questions in
sure.
addition to having their own assignment.
Yeah, and that's hard. That's where we talked about. I know Jessica, Erica, and I had a conversation. We were planning for this, but around you didn't know it happened.
It's okay. It's all right.
But we were talking about, who could you use as that resource? Most hospitals have a float pool, and I know that those individuals are being used in staffing, right? I do get that, and I know that there are staffing needs that they're meeting. But essentially, that's a captive audience that you can pull in, that you can train on how to paper chart, and then deploy throughout the hospital to be a resource for the unit. I think that these people have resources and manpower that they could utilize to make this easier for bedside nurses. I don't know that they're thinking strategically in doing so. I think it's very much just someone's bringing me this piece of paper and saying, I don't know how to do this. And I'm
Yes.
telling this one person how to do this, rather than looking at it from a systems level and saying, okay, none of these people know how to do this. Not a single one of them, or maybe one or two
Yeah.
of them do. And so how do we globally, from a systems perspective, look at this and provide support for all nurses, rather than just fixing the singular problem that's brought to me at this given moment?
Yeah. Yeah.
I never thought I'd be
and
seen
so
as such a hot commodity.
Jessica,
We
go
are.
see how much they'll pay you to be a
Right?
resource.
I seriously, I'd be like, come on, people. Like, look,
Yeah.
I would be up for the challenge. I really would.
Oh, I would too.
I'm not saying it'd be
Yeah,
easy. I don't want
absolutely.
to. Let me not downplay this. I'm just saying there's a lot of older, seasoned nurses that it was vice versa. It was like we hated the transition to the computers for a
Yes.
long
Yeah,
period
like,
of time.
now you love Gen X suddenly, huh? I'm gonna be in my element.
Yeah, like I want to go back to my. Remember, you told me a number is just a number, that my years of experience didn't matter.
Yeah.
What do you got to say about that now, huh?
I love it. I
So
love
I
it.
think there's two kind of components of challenges to the paper charting, and that is the second biggest concern that I am hearing from nurses everywhere. Is first the liability potentially, and second, how in the hell do we paper chart? And at first I was like, well, I mean, you write a note, you just describe what you would instead of clicking a box when you're charting an assessment. Like, I didn't understand how difficult that was, but they don't have the other systems in place to back it up. So, okay, a doctor writes an order, but then how are we getting that order to where it needs to be? Because there's no way to scan it to that department or to enter it in you know what I mean? So the systems that used to be in place to back up the paper charting are not there, A. And B, we have a disproportionately large number of newer nurses that have never had to do this on paper. And so they really don't have any resources or the knowledge to do that. To me, it's kind of a no-brainer. Like, even if you don't have a flow sheet, get out a piece of paper, fold it, trifold, and, chart your assessment, chart your note that you
Write what
received,
your
report
system,
from
write what your
from
systems are.
John,
Were they
and
normal limits? Yeah. Like
yeah,
you're
yeah,
just,
chart by exception, chart your
yep.
vitals, keep an ongoing track of your lines and your fluid intake, an ongoing I&O. Like, to me, I'm like, okay, why can't we do that? But they've really never had to deal with that, so it is super challenging for them, and they don't have anyone to really take the time to explain it. And this should be part of the preparedness for this, some
Absolutely.
kind of an annual education thing where they have to literally sit down and go, okay,
Yeah.
this is how you chart
We would do
on
it.
a
This is how
paper
you
flow
would do
sheet.
it. Yeah.
Well, I would propose that you do that during orientation, first of
Yeah.
all, that you go over downtime proceedings. And then that once a month, I talked about this yesterday with my organization, that once a month you do a 24 hours offline. Like, is that frustrating for nurses at the bedside? Yes. In the moment, we're going to fuss about it, right? Because it's frustrating. Our systems aren't down, so why can't I use the computer?
Right.
Well, in times like this, whenever you have no
That's an
computer,
interesting
you're going to
point.
be
Yeah.
thankful for that experience. So I
Mhm.
think that, for one, I think that you need to do it in orientation. I think that downtime proceedings need to be covered annually and then also in orientation. And then I think you need a 24 hours offline monthly, random day
Yeah.
where all things in the hospital happen on paper in
Yeah.
order to keep your staff competent on how to paper chart, on the processes and systems of moving things through. A physician writes an order for an x-ray. It's flagged in the chart. The clerk brings it to me. I look at the flag. I
It's
see that that's
folded
been ordered.
over.
Yep.
It's folded, literally folded over. I acknowledge it. I put my
You red
initial
line
beside
Yep.
of it.
Yep. And the
Yep.
date
I
and
know that.
time.
I take it. I take that piece of paper. I fax it to radiology.
You stamp it. You stamp
Yeah.
Stamp it,
Oh my God.
fax.
Remember
Like,
the stamp? Oh my God. I forgot about
yes.
that.
So all of those, all of those processes need to be hardwired in nursing. One of the
Yeah.
things that I think is interesting, Erica, and we talked about this when it comes to like even physicians entering in orders that
Yes.
are now part of order sets. We're dealing with a generation of healthcare professionals, not just nursing, who's never been challenged to recall from memory.
Mhm.
These are individuals who've been prompted their entire career.
Yeah.
Oh, I know I need to chart this because it's prompting me to do so.
Right. And it's
Oh,
not
I
their
know that
fault.
I need to do
It's
this.
just how they've
Correct.
learned. Yeah.
It's how they grew up.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's the environment they've grown in. Physicians who say, okay, well, I have a patient who's septic and I know that they may need X, Y, and Z, but I think I also need to do some other things and I forget what those are. Well, that's because they click an order set
Yeah.
and it
And it
tells them
prompts
everything
them.
that they need.
Yeah.
So I think that's huge. I asked that question yesterday. I love my current manager. God love her. She's moving to be an assistant CNO at another hospital. If you're in Arkansas, at Hot Springs, she's amazing. She's phenomenal. So support her, love on her. However, I asked her yesterday, I said, how are physicians going to know? And she said, I'm glad you asked that. Here's your resource. I have all of the approved order sets for our entire facility right here in a binder. You can hand them to the physician and say, here you go. So that
that's
forward
good.
thinking, right? She's very forward thinking.
That's great.
Yeah.
And saying, nurses don't know this. Physicians don't know this. They've never been challenged to recall, essentially from gross memory, what all needs to be ordered. That's scary because I think that we're going to see that patients are we're missing diagnoses or we're delaying diagnoses because we're forgetting to order things that aren't being
Right.
prompted
All of those
to
order
us.
sets should already be on a paper in case
That they can
things like
reference.
this. Yeah.
Yeah. And I mean, you could even make it a paper where they can check the box. Physicians
Mm-hmm.
can just check the box and sign it, and it can be an official order, and you can put it in the chart.
Yeah, it has options of the IV fluids, options of, for that disease process or for whatever they're there for. It's how it used to be.
But I think what we're failing to realize is all of this involves planning, which I'm not sure Ascension did very well.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. Let's talk about reports of managers and leadership in some places being less than supportive or less than present. So, do you have any thoughts about managers that are choosing to go on their vacation that was pre-scheduled in the midst of this, or
Ooh,
not
ooh.
return from their vacation knowing that this is happening?
Uh, First of all, shame on you as a
Yes.
leader.
Yeah. I know
That
Jessica's just
you
shaking
can't.
her head like, are you kidding me?
This is the time when they're like, "Oh, I missed my flight. I'm sorry. I'm stuck in Tahiti for another
Right,
week.
right,
No,
I
really,
can't
I'm
get
being
exactly.
back."
told this. There's a supervisor decided to go to Disney World like 5 days after this.
I
I,
wonder how many
I,
nurses are using their FMLA right now.
right, right. Um, if you are a leader and you're doing that, first of all, shame on you. You're not a
Yes.
leader.
Yes.
I mean, that's not leadership. Second of all, I think that as a leader hired in, that you agree to 24/7 accountability for your unit. Not that I think that you have to be on your unit 24/7 because that's impossible.
Right.
But that you need to have some sort of plan in place to make sure there is a resource for your unit for
Mm-hmm.
24/7. Um, Going on vacation, I think that's unique. In this
I
in
mean, it
this
sounds
So let's talk
ridiculous, but
about it.
they're doing it.
It
They
sounds
are. And
crazy.
it's just a prime example of how out of touch leadership often is with bedside staff. And it's just, to me, it's just infuriating. It's a slap in the
Yeah,
face.
this is what I it is a slap in the face. And this is what I would do. And listen, I'm going to get blackballed from all leadership positions from this point forward. Um, so yeah, I think that if you're choosing to take a vacation, then this is what I would do as a bedside nurse. So for one, I think that the Board of Nursing has an interest to protect the public.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that we understand that there are patient safety issues and public safety issues with a ransomware attack for an organization of this size. And if you're a leader, there's a managerial responsibility on you
Yep.
to mitigate the risk to the public and to those patients.
Yeah.
And if you're choosing to leave, I do not work for a Board of Nursing. I will say that oftentimes management's quick to report bedside nurses to the
Mm-hmm.
board. I think that's a form of patient abandonment.
Yep.
And I think you could report that to the board. If you have nurses who are choosing to take vacations during a cyber attack where things are not under control,
we're
right?
talking about.
Management, correct. We know just anecdotally from what they're sending you, there's nothing that is under control right now at
Right.
Ascension. These hospitals are chaotic.
Yeah.
If
Yeah.
you're choosing to take a vacation during that time, you're abandoning not only your staff, but you're abandoning those patients who are lying in those beds
Yep.
and the public at large who may present to your hospital system. Will that stick? Will there be disciplinary action? I don't know. I'm not the Board of Nursing. Will it set a precedent that we as ground level staff members are not going to simply allow you to leave us in a time of crisis? Absolutely. It sets that standard of we will hold
Mm-hmm.
you accountable. You hold us accountable, we will hold you accountable as well.
Yeah. So if they know that this has happened in the past, that other managers have been reported to the Board of Nursing for similar things, don't you think they would perhaps pause and double check, double consider if they
Oh,
really
absolutely.
want to do it, right? Is it worth a potential report to the Board of Nursing? I think that's
Yeah.
tremendous advice, and it's definitely being very underutilized. This is something I tell nurses all the time, that they really don't realize that in many states, not all, leadership have their own additional separate scope of practice in addition to the regular nursing scope of practice, right? They are held accountable to another set. So it typically looks like they are responsible not necessarily for that one patient assignment, but for the nurses under them and the public health at large, right? So if they are abandoning your unit, your patients in a crisis situation, to me, just like you said, that is absolutely a potential violation of their responsibilities, and that could be reported to the Board of Nursing.
Absolutely. And shame on executive hospital leaders for allowing it to happen.
Yeah.
I mean,
Yeah.
shame on you. If you're a leader and you're going on vacation while your staff is essentially drowning,
Shame on you. Yeah.
shame on you. That you're not a leader.
I'm
I
hearing
hope you get
reports.
sunburnt.
Yeah. Reports that they are, again, management in some cases are allegedly so out of touch that they are pushing the things that are really not a priority right now.
Oh,
So they are
gosh.
just, Jessica and I talked about this. They are inundating staff with just paper after paper after paper. So you're over here trying to just simply find a nurse to verify the medication, that you can't do any of the safety checks for. And then a manager comes up, interrupts you, and hands you a suicide risk score and says, you need to fill this out. Hands you a fall risk score. You need to be filling these out. So yeah, these are important in general, but we are not in normal working conditions right now. So on the prioritization scale, is that really important right now? No. Again, managers just being out of touch.
Did you do your chart audits this week?
Did you update
Honey,
your whiteboard?
Don't forget, you have to turn in 3 chart audits a week, okay? That would make me want to bitch slap somebody.
Can you imagine?
I would say, where do I find it? I can't get into their lockers.
We don't have a chart.
Where do I find the chart? Yeah. Where is it? I think that those hospitals, we learned during COVID that we can have emergent downtime proceedings, right? Hospitals can have a policy that's been approved through the rightful committees to say during a disaster, during an emergency. I think that they have some of this in Florida for hurricanes. I don't live in Florida. I've only worked there as a travel nurse for a very short period of time. But they have, though, you don't have to, you only chart essential things during the disaster, but that requires that the CEO or whoever make a declaration that, hey, we're going to move to disaster proceedings or disaster charting. Crisis charting, I think is what we called it during COVID. And that's a lot of the things that are eliminated. Essentially, we want essentials. We want vital signs. We want MR. We want daily assessments or whatever your assessment should be. If you're ICU like me, Q4-hour assessments.
Speaking from Florida,
essentials.
We always had at least like 200 downtime packets always in the cabinet ready to go. Like that's just, like at least several large stacks of a full, what a computerized chart would be. And I think that should be everywhere.
Standard.
Where if it goes down, you already have it. Everybody can grab one and they can start making the copies of, and people need to be adding to these packets as they add additional things onto the charting. And that would help clear up a lot of this confusion of what do we need? What do we need to get? It should be right there readily available. So that's one thing I'll say. Florida, I mean, at least my hospital system, we always had that. I think it's important everywhere.
Yeah.
It is. Yeah.
When we were talking a couple days ago, Matt, you brought up a huge point that I haven't heard anybody talk about. Incident Command Center. Where the hell are they? Why are they not being activated? To my knowledge.
Does that exist? Is there an incident command center? Where
they're supposed to be in every single organization.
Every hospital. Yeah. I will say, I will sing their praises here because Erica and I, we've talked about them and I've been very politically correct on things in the past. When I was at Vanderbilt does incident command systems incredibly well, right? They are large. They understand well. That they understand that they have a they understand that they have a huge organization and a huge enterprise, and that it requires essentially a core group of people to come together to solve these major issues. I hope that some of these organizations have instituted their incident command centers and staff, which this is an issue, that staff are just unaware of it. If you have not done so, I don't understand why. This is obviously widespread. It's pervasive. Every hospital in Ascension is experiencing this. You need to have a resource for ground level staff members. Vanderbilt, it was whenever the incident command center opened, everyone knew it. The hospital knew it. They knew who they could call if they needed an answer. They did so. They would call down. We would, answer the phone. What do you need? If it was something we could answer on the phone, great. We would take care of it there. If it was something that we needed to send someone, deploy someone to that unit because, hey, there's a fire there right now, it has to be put out, we would deploy someone. It just created a sense of for one, peace, because you knew that people were working on the issue.
Mm-hmm.
2, it provided a resource. And 3, it allowed us to empower staff members to provide the patient care that they were hired to do, knowing that we were behind them, supporting them in whatever that may be, whether that was getting more packets together, going to Staples to buy 3-ring binders. We were doing those things, and we were communicating that daily. Staff members could call into a daily town hall. During COVID, we had 2 of them a day. One happened in the morning, one happened in the evening. Extremely helpful. If a hospital system has not opened an incident command center when there is no end in sight for a prolonged downtime, that's insane to me.
Yeah.
They have to get the people together all in one room who can make the decisions on things that they're going to need to decide, right? Like, who's going to Staples? They need those decisions made,
like,
and those people have to be get
me out of
Jessica's
here.
like, send me. We would send so-and-so, but they're at Disney World, so we can't send them.
Yeah, your manager.
There seems to be a consistent lack of communication. Seems to be a common theme. Everybody is being told something different, it would appear. So yeah, I don't think the communication is effective right now throughout this
one
crisis.
Message. You have to get together, one message. You can't confuse people. Like, if you start giving out mixed messages, my trust for you in you as administration is gone.
Right.
If you tell me one thing and this person tells me another and this person tells me another, then I have no trust anymore. I don't trust anything that you're saying to me. And that's where that incident command center is helpful. It gets all the people in the same room, same message. This is how we're going to tackle this issue. We take this one central message out. We make sure it's happening. We provide that resource. It's really sad if they've not opened their incident command centers.
What about facilities that are still pushing everything because, of course, they don't want a loss of revenue? So they are not canceling elective surgeries. They are not transferring patients out. They are not going on divert. What would you say to that? That's unconscionable to me right now.
I'd say it sounds typical.
Yes.
Yes.
Unfortunately.
I see both sides of it. I do think there is a greater need for the public in that if we had prepared correctly, all those things could still continue to happen.
True.
Right.
That's what I would say. If we would have prepared, we cannot halt patient care. People are still going to present to a hospital. People are still going to have illness and sickness. And we have to fulfill our duty in caring for those individuals. What that requires is the pre-planning to make sure that we can operate on downtime. And I'm not sure that they've done that here, but I from a leadership perspective, I can understand why we would not be halting those things. And I do have the heart of a nurse. So I would also say that, patients are still presenting and we have to care for who presents.
What do you guys think about that? I just thought of this, Matt, like, I wonder, are they like for patients that don't really watch the news and they're going to the ER, are they being told, giving them the option for people? Like, are they being told that they're Yeah,
that's an interesting point because so one of Matt's areas of expertise, I think I can safely say, is EMTALA, right? In fact, that's one of the classes that you taught on the NurseCon cruise. So I'm just going to read a little scenario to you that someone sent me, and I don't know, honestly, if EMTALA comes into play here, but I think it does. So I'm going to let you talk about that. All right. So legal team told facility leadership to no longer tell patients coming into the ER that there will be delays due to downtime because this could be coercing them to go elsewhere to seek care. Since the cyber attack, there have been signs posted advertising or advising ER patients of the delays due to downtime, and staff has informed them when they sign in before being triaged. Now they will be triaged, start their workup in the waiting area, which creates an encounter and a bill without being told of the delays. And then once they get back to a room, only then will they be told of the delays.
So that's correct. So essentially, any patient that presents to a hospital cannot be given any information or told anything that would deter them from seeking medical treatment. So it would be an EMTALA violation, I would think, if a patient presented before they had been given a medical screening exam, if they said, "Hey, we're under a ransomware attack. It's going to take hours to see you," just letting you know that. And I know it would be more formal than that, probably scripted, but that would deter them from seeking the medical screening exam that they presented to receive. So that is correct. What I would do
I
if
don't
I
think
was that
nurses
leadership.
understand that. I think they hear that and they're like,
Yeah,
"Oh my God, this is so wrong. We're not informing them." But you have to look at it from an EMTALA perspective.
a leak.
Yeah.
Yeah, ethical from a moral dilemma perspective, I see that, right? And I
Yes.
get that all the time when people walk into my ER and they say, "Hey, I need X, Y, and Z," and I know that we can't perform X, Y, and Z because I work in a critical access hospital now. But I can't say anything that would deter them from seeking medical treatment. So my answer is, well, I understand that. We're here, we're available, we have a physician who would be more than happy to see you, and then we go from there. Um, that is an EMTALA violation. If you're telling people, especially if you're telling people even subconsciously with the intent that they're going to leave and go to another facility, that is an EMTALA violation.
Yeah.
Now, after they've been giving a medical screening exam, after a physician has seen them, or a provider, I say physician, it could be a provider. After a provider has seen that patient and they've been given a medical screening exam and they have been determined to not have a life-threatening emergency, then yes, you can tell them, "Hey, you're going to be here for a long time. We're under a ransomware attack." But they have to be given that medical screening exam without being deterred from seeking it in order to comply with EMTALA.
That's
That
good
that makes
information.
sense because
Thank you.
they may be presenting and maybe it really is more serious than what the patient realizes or
Right.
something. And, until they're evaluated to make sure it's safe, looking at
Yeah.
it from that perspective, that makes sense. But I mean, they at least need to be told once they can, like, because they need the option
Yes.
of knowing, hey, I don't know that I would feel safe
Yeah.
here. I want to go elsewhere.
Yeah.
So hopefully they are doing
And then,
that.
and if I was hospital admin, it's not illegal to publicly say it, right? And I know that there are certain avenues that are carrying, or certain media outlets that are carrying it,
Yeah.
but I would put it everywhere. Like, as a hospital administrator, I want you to know, I believe in transparency. I want you to understand what you're walking into. So I would run ads in the newspaper. I would run ads on the radio station. I would put ads on the news. We are under a cyber attack.
But they're
We
never
are
going to
under a
do that.
ransomware
was gonna
They're
attack.
say,
just going to
don't
say
say-
everything's
Because that
fine here, nothing
deters.
to see.
We're prepared
Yeah.
for
Right.
this. We're
Mhm.
prepared.
Yeah.
Yeah. That would be me, but you know me, I'm very transparent,
Yeah.
probably too much so in a lot of respects, but I think that transparency builds trust.
Absolutely.
I think
Absolutely.
that whenever people know that you're going to tell them the truth, they trust you, even in times like this, even in times of chaos.
Yeah, even if what
Yeah.
you're telling them they don't like it, but you're
Yeah.
being honest. It is,
Yeah.
it's the truth.
Yeah.
I wanted to touch on two last issues that nurses are
Sure.
bringing forward, and then I'm going to ask you for your parting advice to the healthcare workers out there that are dealing with this. But there appears to be no kind of bedboard patient tracking system in place at many of these facilities. I'm being told that they are essentially losing patients. They have no way of looking up to see, like pharmacy cannot see what unit they're in. Staff cannot see, are they in radiology? There's no tracking system. And some units are really just kind of inventing their own sort of bedboard things on the fly, like with an
Wow.
Excel spreadsheet. And there seems to be no continuity. Everyone's sort of doing it in a silo on their own. Can you imagine the chaos that must come from that?
Yeah, that is insane.
Yeah.
That you can't locate a patient within your facility. I I would assume that it's just their systems that are down, but not their internet. I'm sure they
Yeah.
can get internet,
Yeah.
right? There are all kinds of third-party systems that, like teletracking,
Mhm.
that you can use to track patients that don't speak to your other systems, right?
Right.
That's why a lot of systems don't use them anymore, is because Epic has its own bedboard built into it.
Right.
But if you work at outlying facilities, critical access hospitals, small rural hospitals who may work with EMRs that don't have the capacity to have a bed board, they use things like teletracking,
Yeah, I used that
which is
for
a separate
years
system
and
that they put
years.
patients
Yeah.
into. Right.
Yep.
Why they're not signing up or, emergently getting a contract
Yeah.
with teletracking, or there's others. I'm just saying them because I'm more familiar with them. I mean, there are a multitude of online bed boards
Yeah.
is beyond me. I also
Yeah.
worked in a hospital. I was a house administrator at a hospital which used an online electronic medical record, but it didn't support a bed board. And so I had the old timey whiteboard with
Mhm.
magnets that held the little cards with the patient's name on it,
Right.
where they would call me and say, hey, Jessica needs to move to ICU and she's currently on telemetry in 3B10. And I would go take Jessica's name out of the magnet on 3B10 and move her to ICU. Like,
It
Right.
can be done.
it can be done. That
Yeah.
was a 500 bed hospital. Now we had about 250 inpatients or 300 inpatients, but it was a huge whiteboard with
Mhm.
everyone's name on a small little sheet of paper
Wow.
stuck in a magnet.
Well,
Wow.
There are ways that you can do this, and to think that a unit has to do it on a unit level, that's fantastic. That they recognize that that's an issue and that they're trying to problem solve in real time. This
Mhm.
is where that incident command center needs to come in.
Yep.
Right?
Mhm.
Hey, we're losing patients.
That's
What
a problem.
what are we gonna do? We don't even know where they are. Like, how the
Yeah.
hell are we supposed to find someone in this hospital and
Yeah.
come up with that solution, whether that be buying some type of electronic or, contracting, or making a whiteboard with magnets? There has to be a
Back
system
to
for tracking
Staples we
patient
go.
throughput throughout the hospital.
Off to buy
Back to
magnets.
Staples.
Yeah. Yeah.
Maybe Staples or Office Depot is the behind the ransomware. They're like, oh, I'm kidding.
They're trying to
I'm
increase
kidding.
their
They would
yeah,
never.
yeah, yeah. There have
Well,
already
we'll
been,
never know.
unfortunately, a ton of reports of essentially sentinel events taking place. Countless reports of med errors, reports of DNR patients being coded, vice versa. Lots of reports of just things that should not be happening, which is terrifying, and of course this is alleged. A lot of them seem to be tied to paper Mars. This seems to be a huge area of concern, along with the paper charting. Nurses don't know how to do a paper MAR, and it seems to be handled vastly differently, place to place, unit to unit. They have to handwrite their own MARs, which to me, like, we used to have to do that on night shift all the time. If we had a new admit, no big deal. But I cannot for the life of me figure out why their MARs are not for 24 hours. They're being for 2 days, 3 days, 6 days. So nurses are flipping the paper over, making their own lines to continue a paper MAR for up to 6 days. They don't know to put the time in there, so they don't know when meds were given. Like, it just sounds
What?
like a complete disaster to me. Any thoughts?
Oh God. Oh yeah, training. We need some training.
Right.
Pre-training.
Leadership.
Yeah.
Leadership.
Insane.
Where's their leader in that moment?
They're in
saying,
Disney
this is
World.
how you use a paper
She's in
MAR.
Disney.
Disney World. Disney World. That's right. That's right. Leadership. I mean, that what?
Yeah, I know.
I know.
I will say, and this is something that also is a source of contention amongst leaders. And so I'm telling you, I tell Erica every time she has me on the podcast, Jessica, I'm never going to get hired anywhere ever again.
That's okay. You're in law school. You're in law school now.
Potentially, have we ever thought about the reason we're telling individuals not to put in incident reports is so that we don't know of sentinel events, so we don't have to report them?
Exactly.
All sentinel events are reportable.
Mm-hmm.
They're mandated reports to your accrediting body, to the Joint Commission, in most states to the Department of Health and Human Services.
Yeah.
So those have to be reported. And you as a nurse have also an obligation to report them through your systems. So enter the incident report. I don't care if it creates more work for them at the top or not. I don't care. And you shouldn't either. That's not your responsibility. You have to do your job, and your job is to report what you feel needs to be reported. And they can handle whatever they want to investigate or what they don't want to investigate on the back end. But essentially, you're taking the monkey off of your back and setting it on theirs and saying, Because what's going to happen is administration is going to say, well, I didn't know that was a sentinel event because I didn't know what happened.
Yep,
the nurse didn't tell me.
Exactly. That's why they don't want you to put it
Well,
in.
Well, the nurse didn't report it to you because you told us not to put an incident report.
No,
we
I
didn't.
didn't.
We didn't say that. Why?
We never
You
did
can't
that.
prove that.
I would.
When did we
Right.
say that? There's no
never
proof of
say that.
Paper trails.
Yeah. So,
paper trails.
100% put in those incident reports. 100% those sentinel events need to be reported. Things, and I say this, it breaks my heart to say this. Things happen, and oftentimes we learn in these scenarios when essentially patients become martyrs. And that's so sad to me.
Yeah.
That we as a health system do not look downstream and try to prevent this. And we wait until there is harm or sentinel events or a financial loss or something of that nature to respond.
Yeah.
If you're not reporting those things and there's no agencies holding these organizations accountable, such as the Department of Health and Human Services, the Joint Commission, those individuals who they're reporting to, this may not change. The next time you have a ransomware attack, you may look the exact same that you do today.
Yep.
The only way we grow and we change and we move forward is by holding the proper people accountable and for ensuring that those people make the changes that are needed.
Yeah. Very, very valuable advice there. Any more advice before we hop into the Enema of the Week award? Any more parting advice or thoughts for the nurses out there dealing with this?
For one, I'm terribly sorry that you're having to deal with this and that you're not experiencing what you feel is supportive leadership. Again, that breaks my heart as someone who's passionate about leadership and who's passionate about caring for the nurses who are part of the team. I'm terribly sorry that that's what you're experiencing. I do, again, piggybacking off what I just said, hold these people accountable, right? Hold the right people accountable, follow through. If your manager's at Disney World, report it to the board of nursing.
Yep.
Ask the CNO who comes around and asks you how your day is going. Where's my manager?
Yeah.
Like, ask the people who need to be asked the hard questions. Recognize, and I've said this for years, there are more jobs for nurses than there are nurses to fill them. Allow your fear to essentially dissipate to say what needs to be said in the moment.
Thank you.
You can still be professional and say hard things. I do on a regular basis.
Me too.
So I that would be my recommendation is hold the people accountable who needs to be held accountable, ask the hard questions, and advocate for yourself because you're going to be the only person who probably is.
Yep.
Yeah. Thank you.
True.
Thank you, Matt, for lending all of
You're
your
welcome.
expertise. I knew you would be the perfect person to bring on the podcast to address these issues. You brought up many points that I hadn't even thought of. So thank you. Thank you so much.
That was very nefarious of you, Matthew. Thank you.
Yeah. I kind of like being nefarious. It sounds
you do
fun.
Naughty.
No, honestly, thank you for coming on. It was short notice. We appreciate it.
It was
absolutely anytime. I'm available. I'll make time for you all because I love you both. So
thank you.
We love you too. Well, what's this enema, Erica?
Yeah. So I was going to say the problem of the week is obviously this entire situation.
Problem of the week.
Yes. But no surprise to anyone, I'm sure, to learn that the enema of the week also goes to an Ascension facility, specifically, though, not necessarily because of the cyber attack, but Ascension Via Christi St. Francis in Wichita, Kansas, a few days ago.
Not that we're being specific or anything.
Not that we're being specific.
On Columbus Drive.
Right? Allegedly sent home 6 or 7 SICU nurses, surgical ICU nurses, who refused 3-to-1 assignments. And I was told yesterday that they were just subsequently terminated via text. So, of course, this is absolutely wrong. Thankfully, they are unionized. And so I'm sure the union is, having their back and fighting this on the back end. I think they should all go see a labor attorney
Wow.
absolutely retaliation. I don't know the specifics of how they went about refusing the assignment. I'm going to assume they did it correctly, but the audacity, the corruption, those SICU nurses, and I'm told some of these patients were actually meant to be 1-to-1, not even 1-to-2. So being forced to take 3 patients, they 1,000% did the right thing in
So
refusing
rather than
that
have them
assignment.
stay there and take 2 patients, they opted to just send them home
Yeah. That's
in a
what they do all
crisis?
the time because they're going to make an
Wow.
example out of them to dissuade other nurses from doing it in the future.
Yeah, they
So
deserve
this
the
week's
whole
Enema
enema,
of the
the
Week
whole
award
thing.
goes to Ascension Via Christi St. Francis in Wichita, Kansas. Allegedly.
Yeah. We're allegedly giving you an enema, allegedly. All right. Well deserved. Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you, Matt, again. And
And where can people find you? Tell us one more time. Where can they find you?
Yeah.
So you can find me on my website. It is garveyces.com, and that's for consulting and education services. So garveyces.com. You can find me on LinkedIn. It's Matthew Paul Garvey. You can probably find, I don't have professional Facebooks or Instagrams, but you can find my personal ones. It's the same name as well. And yeah, or through Erica, blow up her Facebook inbox. She loves it when her Facebook inbox is like 9 miles long.
God.
Blow up Erica's Facebook inbox and say, where can I find Matthew? Where can I get Matthew?
Yeah, you could just go to the link in the description.
That's true.
That works as well.
Yeah.
That works as well. But it has been an absolute pleasure. I love Nurses Uncorked.
Thank you.
I love nurses in general. It's a passion of mine. I love being able to support you all, and anything that you need, just let me know.
Thank you so much.
Until next time on the next Nurses Uncorked.